And welcome back to Racing Rundown. We are continuing our coverage of the passing of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II today with one of the most exciting interviews that we have had on Racing Rundown. We have already featured an interview with Brough Scott, broadcaster and current broadcaster with ITV Racing and a journalist for many years in horse racing. We had him on Racing Rundown last time in June after the passing of Lester Piggott, and Brough was so kind to take time out of his very busy schedule to join us to talk about Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. So I'm just introducing this before we get to the interview with Brough. We already talked about this on episode 175, so if you want to hear my thoughts and Eric's thoughts on the passing of the Queen and her impact and everything that she did for horse racing, then I will point you to episode 175 of Racing Rundown for that. And now, without any further delay, I will turn it over to Racing Rundown's interview with Brough Scott with the subject of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II and her impact on racing. Hello, folks, and welcome back to Racing Rundown. As I introduced in the opening, we do have the honor to be joined by Brough Scott again, journalist and broadcaster, to discuss just the impact and everything, our remembrance of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. So to start off with this, I want to ask you about your personal experiences with the Queen, and just, I know that you have, in the long amount of time that you've been involved in racing, you have been involved with every aspect of her time since reigning and when she took over the reins of the royal stable. So just to start off, to ask you about your experiences with watching her through the decades.
Well, it's been very obvious from the beginning that this is the place, the race course, and particularly the stables and studs, were the place where she was most at ease, because she was still the monarch, but she wasn't a visitor. She was a participant. I mean, she was a major player. She uniquely won a major race, which was second in the Derby, the Saturday of her coronation. I was there, actually. I was a little boy having a picnic at Tatton Court with my parents, and our horse all kept flashing around on the Saturday, and I'd be a little boy in the rain waving a flag on the Tuesday at the coronation, so I'd been around a long time. But she won the King George VI Queen Elizabeth Stakes at Ascot in 1954, which is one of our biggest race of the summer, and in 2013 she won the Ascot Gold Cup with Estimate, and the Ascot Gold Cup is the biggest race of the Royal Ascot Meeting and the greatest staying race in the world. So that's an extraordinary link-up. And to have that span, and of course, she's that interested in horses. But again, the Queen was riding at 6 and at 96. She was riding this year. Not much, but she was. And she was riding last year. She had horses up at Balmoral last year. But she, in the racing and horse sense, she's unique as well as the historical monarch sense.
And I want to get into that unique relationship that she's had with racing and just her understanding of the sport. And could you talk a little bit about, you mentioned that she's been riding, and just the understanding that she had for every aspect of racing?
Well, you have to remember that, first of all, she did ride from a young age and loved riding, loved horses. Secondly, her father and grandfather and generations back, the royal studs had been going for centuries too, so there was an inheritance there. And she's spoken very movingly about the first time she actually stroked a thoroughbred as opposed to just ordinary pony, and the velvet feel of its skin. So the whole idea of a thoroughbred was very exciting, and which is very important, the breeding of the horses, so that you're remembering the dams and the granddams and the sires and the grandsires. And because I happen to be a bit nerdy child and following it a bit, I mean, I remember very well her horses in the sort of 50s and 60s. And she would, over the years, always remember. She had very good memory. She'd remember the horses' mothers and dads and granddads and all that sort of thing. And it's not too presumptuous to say that one of the things that kept her alert is that everyone keeps saying about fans of state how much she was still on the ball. Well, having all these horses and knowing about them and asking questions about them, no doubt it kept her mind, even in her 90s, her mind is almost like Pelmanism. You're playing one of those games you have to keep remembering. And she remembered, she knew about her horses. Even on the Tuesday before she died, that's 2 days before she died, she was talking to one of her trainers for more than a couple of minutes about the horse that was running that afternoon, only a minor horse, another horse in the stable and something else. She was completely, her mind was still very sharp, which wouldn't we all like to be that?
And you opened with talking about the story that you had with your experience watching Oriole in the 1953 Derby. And, if you wanted to get further into, your personal experiences with Oriole, then obviously I invite you to do that. But I wanted to ask you about, the significance of Oriole running as well as he did in the Derby, and then what he did in the 1954 season with her, so close to the coronation, and really setting the tone for what her life while being the reigning monarch would be, and her successes in the racing world would be.
Well, because it gave her a great thrill and excitement. We had something as big as that. You want to repeat it, so if that's something that she could do, something she understood, something that sort of brought honour to the royal studs, those famous royal colours. And we don't forget that 2 weeks after Oriole, she had her first winner, a horse called Choir Boy, won the Hunt Cup at Royal Ascot. So again, the Queen's first Royal Ascot as Queen, and there she is, leading in the winners of the Hunt Cup. I mean, it's a great excitement. And this is an amazing young woman in her 20s. I mean, she was 26 at the coronation. 27 when Oriole and Choir Boy. I mean, it was extraordinary, extraordinary thought. And again, don't forget, studs are very private. And I've actually been to the Royal Studs when she's just come around the corner, and I was doing something with the stud manager, and there she is, just walking around because her stud, she knows all the horses, knows all them. Nobody turns a hair because you just get used to her being there, and that was her private place. And then the excitement of going to the racecourses, the horses are going to be tested, and she'd have all the thrill of going to the stables and sharing the sort of sense of camaraderie that anyone who's ever been involved close up with horses knows of in a racing stable. Because don't forget, as we all know, follow racing, most of the time they're losers. Most horses lose most of the time. And she's had all that. She's had plenty of disasters along the way. So she knows that, and she knows she should sympathise with other people, and how sweet the taste of victory is when you get it.
And now we'll move on to her. Correct. I believe that I'm correct on this, but I do apologize if I'm mistaking something. To her first classic winner when she was monarch, and that was Carrozza, who won the 1957 Oaks. And just kind of the same thing that I was getting at with Oriole, having a classic winner. Could you talk about Carrozza and what that meant for Her Majesty to win the Oaks at that point?
Well, there she is, leading in a classic winner at Epsom. It was amazing. And funnily enough, it shows the strength of the game. And she had 2 runners in the race, and the other horse was the better fancy of the 2, called Mulberry Harbour. And Carrozza was the lesser fancied, young Lester Piggott. But it was, again, it set the tone. At that stage, the National Stud was producing horses for her too. National Stud doesn't do that anymore. And they ran in the royal colours. And Carrozza came from the National Stud, not the Royal Studs. Whereas Mulberry Harbour and Oriole had come from the Royal Studs. But they were still the product of just beginning to be, after sort of 57, the Queen's own initiatives where, as a breeder, you're deciding which stallion your mares go to and that sort of thing. So one of the Queen's great pleasures and her biggest pain was she had a very good horse called Do Tell quite soon that she had bred, and he won some big races. And then, as an early time stallion, he at night he wrenched at his rack chain, his chain, and he somehow got it in his mouth and wrenched his mouth open and tore his throat and bled to death overnight. So, the Queen, she knew what disaster felt like too.
Now we'll move on to move forward a couple of decades and talk about the 1974 season. She won a couple of classics in two different countries with Highclere, and just talking about that horse and what she meant to the Queen to continue the successes that she had been having in those first few years of her reign.
Well, there's pictures of the Queen when Highclere won the 1,000 guineas at Newmarket, but then with a very inspired piece of they thought she might not last a mile and a half, so she went for the French Oaks at the Prix Diane at Chantilly, and the Queen went over and won. And there are some fantastic photographs of her there, and the French crowd really cheering her in. And the Queen always kept very good relations with the French. She spoke beautiful French, and that was a very happy time, Highclere, and of course she then had a pretty good filly in Height of Fashion, which the Queen then sold, and Height of Fashion then became one of the great dams of recent times, unfortunately in the colours of Sheikh Hamdan. The Nashgrans and Umferwains, and they were all out of Height of Fashion.
And we'll move on now to another filly that she had success with at Epsom, and that was Dunfermline in her Silver Jubilee year. And to have a horse to win two classics, she won after the Oaks, she won the St. Leger. And what was that like to ring in the celebration of her Silver Jubilee, to have a filly that was running at this high of level and having that kind of success?
Well, it was absolutely terrific because I was anchoring the TV coverage for both the Epsom and Doncaster for the Oaks and the St. Leger. And finally, I was with Willie Carson this week, and we were remembering it. He rode Dunfermline both times, and he was saying what a thrill it was to win a classic for the Queen. The only slight drawback is because it was Jubilee year, there was a special Jubilee celebration long booked on the Saturday at Windsor, so she couldn't be at the Oaks. And for a number of reasons I can't remember, presumably something up in Scotland, she couldn't come to St. Leger. So Willie was saying, so one thing slightly missing is that he rode a classic winner for the Queen, but he didn't have the Queen to lead him in. And from my point of view of doing television for 30, 40 years, I've been lucky enough to do some big shows, but I've had a Royal Classic winner, but I've never actually had the Queen leading a Royal Classic winner. It would have been lovely to have been presenting a show like that.
And we'll move on now to, again, fast forward a few decades. She did run into some lean times toward the beginning of the 2000s, and even though she wasn't being as successful as she had been in the past, what was that like to have, even though the successes weren't quite there, for her passion to still be there and for her to be as involved in racing as she was, even when back earlier on in her time as an owner and a breeder when she was having more success?
Yes, I mean, you're being very polite about it because it was going down. It got pretty low, really. I mean, she had two seasons. She only had 6 winners, and this is a team that in the 50s, she was twice really owner in the 50s. And as you said, Dunfermline won two classics in the 70s. But things had, and there are various reasons for it. Politically, she couldn't use Irish stallions, and the best stallions were in Ireland or in America. And the mechanics and the finances of going to America and getting the top American stallions weren't there. things have changed. She's now used, more recent years, she's been able to use American stallions and be able to use Irish stallions. And there are much better stallions in England. Things like Frank or Kingman are all standing in England. So, and there's no question, I've been talking to her stud manager, and when it all went really low, the Queen, who was already in her 70s, many people might have said, oh, well, we've had our good run, but she wanted to reinvigorate and reboot the whole thing. And the irony of it, poignancy perhaps is the right word, is that she's actually, at the moment of her departure, the situation is stronger than it's been for a very, very long time. And numerically, last year was the best year she'd ever had. She had 36 individual winners, 36 wins on the track, which is, it never happened in all her 70 years on the throne. And obviously, when she first was an owner, he was a big owner, but she'd only have 30 or so, 20 or so horses. The big owners now have hundreds of horses, so you can't compete at all. But she's got the horses coming through they're often very quality horses with quality breeding. And, we've always been thinking, would there possibly be a horse for the Derby? As you probably remember, there was one this year with a lovely name called Reach for the Moon, which we thought might shape up but didn't make it. But only 3 weeks ago, I was at a small meeting in Salisbury when a big, rangy, green 2-year-old caught his stride in the second half of the race and stormed clear, and was in that category of could be anything. He's well bred, moralistic, called Circle of Fire, and it could be the supreme irony that next summer, there could be a Royal Derby winner, but it would be a posthumous triumph for the Queen.
It's actually good that you bring up the prospects of a Royal Derby winner, because I wanted to get to 2011 in Carlton House. When Carlton House won the Dante, what were the prospects of a Royal Derby winner were, I imagine, as good as they had been in decades. And what was that like after he had won that race, and just the potential of maybe this one is going to be the one to do it for the Queen? Because at that point, she'd won 4 of the 5 classics. The Derby was the only one that she hadn't won. And what was the prospects of leading up into that 2011 Epsom Derby that maybe this one could be the one that gets it done for the Queen?
Well, there was a great sort of yearning across the racing parish. But there was also a degree of angst because people will recall the horse had a setback in training, so it was touch and go to get there. And everyone was pretty tight-lipped about him. So he had a problem getting there, and then everything went wrong on the day too. I mean, he had that race again. He'd probably win it 6 times out of 10. I mean, he lost the shoe, and the rhythm of the race didn't go his way. He didn't get beaten very far. He perhaps not 6 times 10, but probably he might have won it 5 times out of 10. He was just a bit unlucky, really, and he did lose a shoe, and things had gone wrong just in the last sort of fortnight of training, which, as everybody knows, you can't afford to do. But, I mean, if he'd been that horse at his best and with a smooth run through the race, would have won that Derby. And it's one of those sadnesses. It was much the Queen's closest shot since Oriel, all those years back, 53.
And now we're going to move on to what's probably her most significant winner. And the commentary of this race was absolutely perfect. The commentary of it was a happy and glorious day at Royal Ascot in 2013 when Estimate won the Gold Cup. And you referenced Estimate earlier on, and I want to dive further into her winning the Gold Cup, the circumstances leading up into that, and then the moment when it happened, and afterwards just the magnitude of the Queen being the first reigning monarch to ever win that race, and how significant and special of a day that was in 2013 at that Royal Ascot meet.
Well, the stars really aligned. Everything came right. The horse was very much a horse you could target for it. She'd won the Queen's Vase the year before, not quite as far, but she'd won on the course. She was trained by Michael Stout, who's a sort of master of the trainers, the senior trainer around, and ridden by Ryan Moore, who was a proper 24-carat jockey. And she didn't win by far. I didn't know the pictures, but she was always really going to win. But it wasn't as if she was going to win because it's all easy or she was a certainty, but somehow you could see it was going to happen. And it was a proper battle. And because of big screens now, you saw the Queen's picture. I mean, very quickly they cut to the picture of the Queen. Anybody looking at the television saw the Queen, and everyone knows those images now of the royal colours on Ryan Moore and Estemus, and then up in the box, the Queen in that purple dress and absolute punch in the air delight as the horse went past the post. And it was very special. That's one of the times when if you're someone like me who's been around rather too long, but also to an extent sort of brought up following the royal racing fortunes, to see that it was very special, and it was special for a wider global audience.
And we'll talk about the global impact of the Queen now, and just the impact that she leaves on horse racing everywhere in the world. Obviously, she was an owner in the United Kingdom, but her impact is wide-ranging. She's been to the Kentucky Derby here. She's been to countless racing operations, and all you have to do is just look around the world, and you'll see the impact that Queen Elizabeth had. And what was just to talk about her impact and the devotion and all the time that she gave to this sport.
I think that it's not in any sense an exaggeration to say the Queen is the most important figure that racing worldwide has ever had, because not only is she cemented in Britain, but the focus, she owns Royal Ascot, the most iconic image, notwithstanding Melbourne Cups or the Kentucky Derby or Hong Kong or Dubai World Cup, the most iconic image in the whole racing game, if you think about it, is the royal carriages and the Queen in them and the white horses coming up the straight at Royal Ascot. Royal Ascot, the only 5 consecutive day turf meeting, the greatest therefore race meeting in the world, and the Queen to be the centre of that, and that is the focus, and therefore there's no doubt in my mind that the Middle Eastern influence, investment, which is, remember, I mean, it's in America and in Australia and around the world, but that is the greatest individual from a group of countries investment in the history of horse racing. There's no doubt in my mind that wouldn't be anything, wouldn't have accelerated, wouldn't have built up anything like it without the fact that very soon the Sheikh Mohammed, Sheikh Hamdas and Maktoums were actually, because they were in the same game, they were standing on the podium at Royal Ascot and receiving trophies of the Queen, that sort of thing. Now the recognition that gives an emerging state was extraordinary, and therefore people want to have part of that, and therefore her influence. And the other thing I think I would add to it, that influence, it's her standing. As we all know, racing has its is not always reflects well in the public arena, and there are people who take shortcuts, and racing scandal is not an unknown headline. But the Queen was never associated with scandal. The Queen was always, at the very least, a good deed in a naughty world. The Queen represented all that was glorious about racing. And of course, there are lots of other sides as part of racing's charm. It's got people trying to cut corners, all that sort of stuff. But at the centre, at the pinnacle, there was the Queen with her own horses, because she loved horses and loved the racing game, loved the thrill, loved the excitement, loved the uncertainty. And racing has its challenge to keep relevance all over the world against other sports. to not just be a sort of fading betting game. And to do that, it has to espouse the things that the Queen liked about it, the glory and the excitement and the beauty and the thrill. That's what she loved, and the history of it. And she was I'm talking from Britain, where she was a great example in lots of other ways, but in racing she was a huge example too.
And well, I'll end off by asking you, what do you think are some of the biggest things that racing will miss without having Queen Elizabeth II involved in it anymore, and just some of the biggest things that will be the sense of lacking with not having her here anymore with us?
Well, we're going to be, as a nation, I mean, to not say she's global, but we are at the moment, and I speak, when the Queen is still lying, the coffin is still lying in state, but we are, we're a family that's lost its, matriarch, its granny. We are bereft, and racing, the feeling is as acute or was more acute than anywhere in the kingdom, because this was her game. So we'll never have her around the racecourse, because if she saw at the racecourse, it wasn't that sort of surprise. This is the horse running; she might be there, and it was just sort of to have her there. That's gone. But the game goes on, and the royal colours will still be there, and it'll go forwards, and we have to build on the memories. It's so good, my parents died long ago. So I'd love to have them back. We won't have her back. But we have wonderful memories, and we have inspiration to take racing forward, and that's what even people as old as me want to try and do.
And with that being mentioned, I would like to just say once again, thank you for taking the time to come join us to talk about the Queen. And you mentioned to me before that you're going on holiday next week, so I wish you a restful holiday. And once again, thank you for taking the time to speak with us about the Queen.
It's a pleasure. Good luck.
So that was our interview with Brough Scott, and that does conclude our coverage of the passing of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. I will definitely echo what he said, what Brough said in some of those things. One of the most impactful people that there ever has been for horse racing, and it's a tremendous loss for the racing industry. Obviously, we mourn for the passing, or what her passing means for racing, but we're thankful for everything that she has done in her time for racing. And while there will never be another Queen Elizabeth II, as Brough said, we do carry on her memories going forward. And to end this off, I will turn it over to the intro clip that I played for Racing Rundown, episode number 175, and I will close that off with this. So this has been Jack Sargent. This has been our interview with Brough Scott on the passing of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, and this has been Racing Rundown. We'll see you next week.
Racing into the final, 150 yards, it's high clear, but it's going to be a photo finish. All the 1,000 guineas left the line, it's absolutely impossible to separate. On the near side, Willie Carson, Dunfermline, and it's going to be a royal victory, I think. On the near side, Dunfermline, and Dunfermline now going into the lead, and Dunfermline wins the Oak from... And it's Dunfermline and Willie Carson. Could this be another royal classic? Alleged is fighting back, but Dunfermline has the advantage. Racing to the line, Dunfermline is going to win it. And at the line, Dunfermline is the winner. Carlton House asserting close home the dream of a Royal Derby winner alive as Carlton House wins the Dante.
And coming to the finish, called to mind in the colours of the Queen. But Tactical coming the stand side now with James Doyle, and it is Tactical who wins.
Into the closing stages, Estimate and Simonon, top trip trying to get on turns between those. Estimate the red sleeve jacket, Simonon on the outside, racing towards